Let me share a secret with you. Almost every year since my first year in seminary, I've found some way to attend an Ash Wednesday service. How many of you are familiar with this ritual? Ash Wednesday. Ash Wednesday is a service conducted in some Christian churches at the start of the season of Lent. The first time I encountered it, I was in seminary. I had found Unitarian Universalism after leaving a conservative version of Christianity that told me not to ask questions. Well, that was impossible. When I went to seminary, I deliberately picked one that had a strong UU presence as well as a strongly progressive Christian student body. I hoped that this would allow me the opportunity to heal my feelings about our own story as Universalists and Unitarians, as well as my history with the Christianity that is often found in the Midwest and most definitely found in Kansas. What surprised me in this seminary was that the Unitarian Universalists and the rest of the student body sometimes, if not often, struggled with each other. We were challenged by everything from our varied beliefs to how we prayed together in class. And we improved the situation over my time there, but that's a story for a different sermon. It was in this initial environment of conflict that I went, curious, to the Wednesday chapel on the day of the Ash Wednesday service. Our chapel director was well aware of the Unitarian Universalists at our school and how sometimes our faith journey can lead us unexpected places. A former nun, she had left Catholicism to become a United Church of Christ minister. Right? She had some good stories, let me tell you. She created a service that was distinctly true to her faith while also having a lot of room for any Unitarian Universalist that might show up. Several of my friends decided not to go. So I crept sort of anxiously into the room, staying near the back and to the left, as though vaguely afraid I would either get caught by another UU or struck by lightning. I wasn't sure which was worse, honestly. The Ash Wednesday ritual typically involves having a small bit of ashes smeared onto one's forehead, sometimes in the shape of a cross, as a reminder that from dust you came and to dust you will return. As we moved through the service, it was made clear that there wasn't any requirement for anyone to participate in anything. The chapel director also said you could ask for the ashes to be placed on your forehead or on your hand. I suspect this last option was for the Unitarian Universalists in the room who might not want to walk around with a cross on their forehead the rest of the day. Impulsively, and out of a deep need for more ritual in my life, I jumped into the line closest to the door. There's always an opportunity to run. When I reached the front of the line, I stuck my palm out to the professor standing in front of me. She placed ashes on my hand, reminding me that I was alive and that one day I would die. She went on to offer a beautiful blessing on my life and what I have to share with the world. It felt like a holy moment. And I'm not one to embrace the idea of my death easily. I've told Virginia more than once that I plan to live forever or die trying. I'm serious. But this moment gave me permission, just for a little while, to be at peace with that inevitability, while also calling me to continue to offer the world what I could. My first Ash Wednesday experience was precious to me, and when I left the chapel, I curled my hand protectively around the ashes on my palm, also so nobody could see them. I want to explain things. I suddenly felt anxious and protective all at once. It mattered too much to me to open myself up to criticism. I had a trip off campus scheduled with a friend who had purposefully skipped chapel that day. I kept my hand curled the entire time, unwilling to share my experience with another Unitarian Universalist. Since that time, I've attended Ash Wednesday services almost every year. And things have changed for me since that first time. I've learned how infrequently youths talk to one another about our deep beliefs, how little what we talk about what we need, and how little we engage in ritual. I understood my own deep desire for our tradition to have a shared story, some rituals or touchstones or stories that help us explore together the human experience. Judaism, for example, covers those major touchstones over the course of a year: grief, forgiveness, joy, compassion, connection, and more. In the Christian tradition, stories center primarily around a particular figure, and they also cover a variety of human experiences, offering people the opportunity to pause and reflect, to move through a holy time of considering what it means to be alive, what it means to see the world as it is, full of tragedy and beauty, and what it means to know that one day we will die. I often tell people that our theological diversity, in fact, I said this yesterday, our theological diversity as UUs is both our greatest strength and our greatest weakness. It is our greatest weakness when we create communities where someone can't talk about sacred moments, where they don't feel comfortable telling people they follow Jesus or Buddha, or they don't feel like they can say, well, ultimately, I just don't know, or I don't think anything happens when we die. My experience in seminary taught me the importance of making our congregations places where our diversity is our strength, where someone can talk about God or the goddess or about their understanding of the world is lacking any sort of spiritual accompaniment. I've been considering this all week. Our theme for this month is journey. And I've been thinking about the ways our faith supports and loves people on our journey together, as well as the areas where we are still striving. And all of this has also been on my mind as I followed the experiences of a different tradition, the United Methodist Church, as its members gathered for the highly publicized General Conference. I have some strong connections to Methodism. My father's family has been Methodist for as long as we can remember, and my father-in-law and sister-in-law are Methodist clergy. Virginia is sure that God was laughing when she went from being a Methodist preacher's kid to a UU's wife. So, surrounded by all these United Methodists, we were very aware when the time for their big international General Conference was approaching. How many of you followed that? How many of you followed it pretty closely? Okay. For those of you who don't know, and it doesn't sound like there are many, I want to give you just a little background on what has been going on for them. Methodists and Unitarian Universalists have a much different polity or church organizational structure. We UUs have what is called congregational polity, which means our individual congregations make decisions about themselves and for themselves. An example of this is to be ordained in our tradition, a church has to do it because our congregations are the ultimate governing body. Our Methodist siblings are in what is known as connectional polity. The churches are organized into conferences guided by elected bishops, and the entire tradition is guided in part by the United Methodist Book of Discipline. Elected delegates from the conferences around the entire world meet regularly in what they call General Conference that allows them the opportunity to review and revise the Book of Discipline and other guidance documents. The 2019 General Conference was to decide how the Book of Discipline would address the issue of people like me. People who are lesbian, gay, bisexual. Previously, the book had said that ministers could not officiate or participate in marriages of people who are not straight. It further indicated that people who were self-avowed practicing homosexuals could not be ministers in the tradition. There's a joke about not needing more practice. It's probably inappropriate, so moving on. The General Conference was to decide how to move forward in the light of the fact that many of the United Methodist churches in the United States were welcoming to LGBTQ plus folks. United Methodist congregations have hosted same-sex weddings. and United Methodist regions have ordained LGBT people. Even one of the elected bishops of the United Methodist Church in the United States is an open lesbian married to another woman. But the United Methodist Church, unlike many U.S.-centered denominations, includes millions of members around the world. And in other cultural contexts, LGBTQ inclusion is not as common as it is here. So there have been conflict in recent decades over the choice of many U.S. Methodists to violate the official rules of their life together, their covenant. There were multiple plans proposed at the General Conference for how to move forward. One was called the Simple Plan, and it would have simply removed exclusionary language from the Book of Discipline. Another option, the One Church Plan, would have allowed each conference to decide for themselves about the appointment of LGBTQ bishops and clergy, and each church and pastor to decide about weddings. A third option, the Traditional Plan, would strengthen the penalties for clergy who perform same-sex weddings and require particular actions from bishops designed to prevent them from allowing practicing LGBTQ clergy. If you have followed this news story at all, and most of you have, you know the Traditional Plan won. And if you followed it closely, you know that the plan won by a very narrow margin. Close to half of the worldwide United Methodist Church prefers the more inclusive options. Since the vote, our Methodist siblings are reacting in a variety of ways. Some, of course, celebrated the decision. In the United States, however, responses have been mostly ones of grief and pain. Some have expressed their profound disappointment. Virginia spent a lot of time on phone calls with heartbroken friends. Others are angry. My sister-in-law, a Methodist deacon, is fired up and threatening to apply to be a delegate to the next General Conference. My father-in-law has threatened, the retired minister, has threatened to break out his law degree and defend any clergy member who is charged with violating the discipline simply by practicing inclusion. Now, you might be wondering why I'm giving you this quick lesson on another church's policy debates. We have enough of our own. Well, as we consider the theme of Journey this month, I've had the privilege of glimpsing a bit of my father-in-law's faith journey to get where he is now. Before the General Conference started, he called my wife because he had started a blog, and he wanted to post something that would in part be about her. He was seeking her permission to post it, having learned long ago not to use his daughters as a sermon or teaching illustration without asking first. We've already had this discussion about our children. Virginia gave that permission, and today I'd like to share with you just a piece of what he wrote. If you're interested in more, let me know. I can send you the link. He says, I began to strongly identify with and advocate for what are identified as the evangelical renewal movements within the United Methodist Church early in my ministry, because I saw them taking principled stands for sound orthodoxy related to the scriptures, our articles of religion, and obedience to the structures and strictures of our Book of Discipline. My liberal colleagues, in my opinion, were too focused on institutional preservation and societal transformation than in doing all they could to first save eternal souls from an eternity in the absence of God, and then working on society and the institution of the church. Then came the issues of homosexuality and same-sex marriage. I was offended when some clergy solemnized same-sex weddings or commitment services. Not only were they not legally recognized at the time, they were expressly prohibited by our church law, and therefore a serious violation of our covenant as clergy in a system that billed itself as connectional. I applauded the results of church disciplinary proceedings that removed the credentials of some and decried others that gave what appeared to be a mere slap on the wrist to violators. I played a significant role in organizing clergy and laity within our annual conference that believed as I did. resulting in a much more orthodox and evangelical delegation of voters to General Conference in order to stem the tide seeking to soften our denominational positions on marriage and ordination. Soon I found myself as a board member of one evangelical renewal organization. Then my oldest child came out. I was floored. Like many parents, I wondered what I had done or failed to do as a father to cause it. I realized this was a test of my faith. Would I be able to love her unconditionally while still loving the Lord without limitation as I understood both relationships? Could I advocate and work for what I firmly thought was biblical and theologically right without hurting my own child? I believed and still believe in the power of prayer. So I prayed, Lord, please change her or change me. Every day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, and God answered my prayers. It took a long time, and the answer was not what I really wanted God to do when I started, but my prayers were answered. He has a lot more to say here, but in the interest of time, I'll tell you a few things about where he is on his own faith journey these days. When Virginia and I were planning our wedding, we decided not to ask him to participate. He was still a minister yet and yet retired, and we knew him as a rule follower, which he says comes from his Boy Scout and lawyer years. And since he hadn't retired from the church, we didn't want to ask him to violate the rules in order to actively participate in our wedding. But he came to us instead. He asked if he might offer a blessing at our ceremony. We understood what it meant for him to ask this and gratefully accepted. Since then, he has spoken and continues to speak out about the traditional plan, something he would have one time have supported. He started by sharing his journey online, his story of earnest struggle and growth and change on matters of inclusion. After the decision of the General Conference to adopt the exclusionary traditional plan, he started discussing ways he would work to undo the harm he acknowledges he played some role in creating those many years ago. This is the nature of a faith journey. We don't always know much about the path we are on until we are a little ways down the road. And it's helpful to be able to look back and acknowledge honestly where we've been. The Christian season of Lent is centered around this very practice. Other traditions also encourage this type of self-examination, including the Jewish days of awe or days of repentance, and even to some extent the secular New Year observance. Continuing along the journey often begins by looking back so we can commit to moving forward in ways that further live into our values. As a side note, if you're wondering how to support friends in the United Methodist Church on their journey right now, please just listen. Reach out to them, but don't tell them to come to our church. Right now, they just need to grieve and decide for themselves if they need to leave or if they want to stay and fight. And additional side note, yes, that is the only time I will tell you, don't tell them to come to our church. Do let your friends know that if they do stay and fight, they won't be alone on that path. For one, my family will be there with them. My friends, the journey of faith is much like the labyrinth that you see on this screen. The labyrinth is an ancient walking path, a symbol of pilgrimage and the journey of life. It is not a simple spiral to the center with each twist and turn bringing you clearly closer to the goal. No, rather, as you move in and out of the turns of the labyrinth, sometimes the turns that seem to take you furthest away are bringing you closest to the center. It's nearly impossible to tell from the outside exactly where a person is on their journey. Are they walking inward? Are they walking out? Have they just begun? Have they been walking for a while? The twists and turns of the labyrinth walking path make the answers to these questions unclear. What is even more challenging is that it can sometimes be impossible to tell from inside the labyrinth how close you are to the center of your walk. What a metaphor for our faith journey. Journeys like this can offer unexpected twists and turns, the path taking you to the edge just when you thought you'd found the middle. It's not easy to tell who is further along the path than others, and often we aren't sure how far along we are ourselves. We can look back to see where we've recently been, and then we must keep moving on. Faith, knowing full well that there are more twists and turns ahead. My beloved spiritual companions, this is the power to be found in spiritual practices. Practices such as receiving ashes, observing a dedicated season of repentance or contemplation, or walking a labyrinth. They all offer the opportunity to reflect, the opportunity for introspection, the opportunity to understand our journey of life and faith and where we are on it. I encourage you to take some time over the next month to create ritual, perhaps a regular walking or journaling or meditation or something else that gives you the opportunity to consider your own journey. Are you near the center, the edge? What turns have brought you here? Where might the next turns take you? Blessed be. Amen.